right, today we are going to be making, turning some dried beans into refried beans. So I've got my crock pot and I've already bought the beans and I open them out of the bags and go ahead and put them in the jar. That way no bugs or anything else can get into the beans while they're being stored in my pantry. And my crock pot is empty. So I'm going to just fill the crock pot about halfway with beans. I'm not going to measure. And I've done maybe a fourth of the way, maybe a third. And before I put water in, I'm going to look through the beans, and sometimes some of them look kind of funky, or you occasionally will even have a rock or something else like that. So I have found here is 2 small rocks and 2 funky beans. So I'm going to pull those out because we don't want those in our refried beans. And they're going to go in the trash can. And then I'm going to fill the rest of the crock pot with water. And you want to make sure the water is over the beans. And I have quite a bit more because the beans are going to expand. And you're going to just set it in your crock pot. I usually leave my lid on part way just to keep out any kind of dust or dog hair, but leave room for air. And if we don't soak the beans, if we just cook them, they're never going to get soft. They're just going to stay hard. So that's why this part is very important, to soak the beans, and we're going to leave them overnight. Or you could do this 6 hours or so. You could start this process in the morning and finish in the afternoon. All right, so our beans have soaked overnight in water. Now we are going to drain them. So I've got my colander I'm going to put in the sink. The beans have expanded now. I'm going to drain them and rinse out the colander. And I rinse the pot out. There are a few little tiny, looks like tiny little rocks or something in here still. Clean that out. Rinse the beans. Dump the beans back into my crock pot liner. And I'm going to fill the crock pot with water. And again, these are dried pinto beans. You could also make refried beans with black beans or another favorite bean. I always do pinto. The traditional. Right, that's going to go into my crock pot. And I'm going to plug that on. It's going to take different times for different crock pots, or you could even do this on the stove. It's probably going to take me probably 2 to 3 hours on high. So we're just going to leave that there, let that cook, and then come back and finish them up later today. It's been several hours now. Our beans should be nice and soft. We're going to test them by just taking one and smashing it against the side of the crock pot, and if it smashes easily, then they are all set. So we're going to strain the water, but you want to save some of it in case the beans become too thick when you mash them. So I've got my colander inside of a bowl to reserve some of the liquid. I'm going to set that in the sink, and I'm going to take the liner out of the crock pot. Go ahead and dump that in my colander. And put all of the beans back in my pot. sauteed very finely diced onions and garlic that I had already previously cooked. I'm going to add that in. I used 1 small onion. If you like more, you're welcome to use a large onion, use 2. And now I'm going to add cumin. Just a few shakes here. You can certainly measure, but remember, we're making a lot of beans, so you're gonna need quite a bit. And this doesn't seem to be coming out too good, so we're gonna let that come out more. And I'm gonna add some oregano. Most people like to also add salt. We try to do low salt here, so I'm not going to add any salt today. Next comes the fun part. It's time to mash the beans. I like to use a stick blender, or some people call this an immersion blender. You can also use a potato masher, or whatever, if you want to just use a fork, whatever. This is the easiest method I've found. You can put them in a blender, but it's one more thing larger to wash. So I'm going to push it on down and start mashing. And I can already tell this is going to need some liquid. So I'm going to just use the bowl I had used earlier that had the onions in it, and I'm going to scoop some of the liquid that the beans cooked in, and I'm going to dump that back in. I'm going to do two scoops. So that's probably about 3/4 to a full cup that I've added back. And that's going to make it a little easier to mash. You're going to keep on mashing. And because these are homemade, you can make them the consistency that you like. Some people are going to want them all the way mashed. Others are going to like to still have a little bit of a solid bean in there. I like to have a little bit of some pieces of beans, but for the most part, pretty mashed. Are now mashed. I'm going to take the water out and just show you what the beans look like. So they're for the most part, they're mashed. There are some chunks of bean in here, and that's okay. You can certainly keep mashing if you want it all smooth consistency. Now I'm going to let this sit for probably another hour or 2 to cool off. I'll probably go ahead and take it out of the crock pot and just, well, out of the liner out. It'll cool a little bit quicker. And once that's nice and cool, I will go ahead and scoop those into containers for the freezer. And then anytime I'm going to make enchiladas, tacos, any recipe that calls for refried beans, I'm going to take it out of the freezer. Ideally the day before. You could also take it out in the morning of that you're making the recipe. And we don't need to buy the canned refried beans anymore. That's it. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free